The little black girl hid behind a stack of metal sheets, calling the biker as heavy boots approached the foundry steps. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a dark and stormy evening in the outskirts of a small industrial town. The wind howled, pushing the chill of the night through the empty streets. In a remote corner, a foundry sat abandoned, its steel structures rusted and forgotten. The place was a labyrinth of metal sheets stacked high, remnants of an era long past. And it was here that a young girl found herself hiding, trembling with fear. Her name was Maya, a little black girl, no older than 9, and she was running for her life. Her heart pounded in her chest as she pressed herself against the cold metal, trying to remain silent. She could hear the heavy boots approaching, each step getting closer, sending a wave of terror through her fragile body. Her hands were shaking as she pressed them against her mouth, stifling the sobs that threatened to escape. Her thoughts raced. Would she be safe? Would anyone come to help her? The man who had been chasing her was relentless. He was her stepfather, a man whose anger had no limits. Maya had been running from him for what felt like hours. He had been drunk, yelling, and hitting her mother again. But tonight, something snapped in her, and she couldn't stay. She had to run. She had to escape. The foundry was her only hope, a place to hide, a place to wait. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes wide with fear as she saw the shadow of the man's silhouette getting closer. She didn't know how much longer she could hold on, but she had to try. Then, out of the darkness, she saw them. The sound of roaring motorcycles reached her ears, a familiar sound that sent a wave of relief crashing over her. The bikers. She had heard stories about them. People who would fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. She had heard her mother talk about a promise made long ago, a promise to protect her, but she never imagined it would come true like this. She let out a desperate cry, her voice trembling as she whispered, "Help me. Please help me." Her words barely carried above the noise of the wind, but she knew they would hear her. The bikers were her only chance. The sound of the motorcycles grew louder, and Maya's heart skipped a beat. They were here. She could see them now, the bikes rolling into the yard, their headlights cutting through the night. She could see the men dismounting, their leather jackets shining in the dim light. Each one had a look of determination in their eyes, a look that told her they would stop at nothing to protect her. But it was not just the bikers she had to worry about. The sound of heavy boots was still closing in, and she could hear her stepfather cursing from the other side of the stacks of metal. Maya's heart raced once more as she thought about what would happen if the bikers couldn't get to her in time. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying they would. The bikers spread out, moving swiftly but carefully. One of them, a large man with a deep voice, called out, "Where is she?" Maya's voice shook as she replied, "Over here, behind the metal sheets." She could barely breathe as she heard him approach, his footsteps growing louder with each passing second. The man's voice came next, a low, menacing growl. "You can't hide forever, little girl." Maya's pulse quickened, but then, to her relief, she heard the bikers respond. The sound of engines revving cut through the tension, and Maya's heart swelled with hope. She was not alone anymore. The sound of roaring engines filled the air, drowning out the wind that had been howling through the broken windows of the abandoned foundry. Maya's heart raced, her body trembling as she pressed herself closer to the cold metal sheets, the only thing standing between her and the terrifying man who had been chasing her. She had heard the bikers approaching, but now, as they dismounted and moved closer, the fear was almost too much to bear. The man's heavy footsteps echoed in the distance, but they were getting closer. Her stepfather was still on her trail, and she had no idea how much longer she could hide. "Please," she whispered to herself, "please let them be able to help me." Then, out of the darkness, a deep voice cut through the tension. "We're here for you, little one." It was one of the bikers, the same man who had called out moments ago. His voice was calm, reassuring, but there was a sense of urgency beneath it. He sounded like he had been through 1,000 dangerous situations, and now he was here, protecting her. Maya's eyes widened as she watched him and the others move swiftly around the foundry. They were everywhere, scanning the area, their dark leather jackets standing out against the shadows. They were a family, a group bound by loyalty and honor, and they had come for her. "Stay low," the man whispered, crouching down beside her. His face was covered by a helmet, but his eyes were filled with kindness. "We'll take care of everything." Maya nodded, trying to calm her breathing, but it was hard. She was scared, and the thought of what her stepfather might do to her if he found her sent chills down her spine. She glanced over her shoulder, her eyes darting from the piles of metal to the shadows, hoping to see something, anything, that might signal safety. But there was only darkness. The sound of her stepfather's angry voice pierced through the night, sending a wave of panic through her. "I'll find you, Maya," he shouted, his voice dripping with malice. "You can't hide forever." Maya's breath hitched, but the biker beside her placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone," he said softly. "We'll make sure he never hurts you again." The man's voice was steady, but Maya could sense the underlying promise in his words. These bikers weren't just here to chase her stepfather away. They were here to protect her, no matter the cost. As the man stood up and motioned to the others, Maya's mind raced. She could hear the rumble of engines starting up again, the sound of the bikers preparing to take action. The footsteps of her stepfather grew closer, and Maya felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. The bikers had arrived, but they still had to face the danger that lay ahead. She could hear the sound of her stepfather's voice getting louder, closer, as he stomped toward her hiding spot. "You think you can run from me? You think you can hide?" His words were like a thunderstorm, heavy with anger and control. Maya felt her heart race, and for a moment, she thought she might not make it out of here. But then she remembered the bikers, their promise, their loyalty. They had come for her, and they would keep that promise. "You're not going anywhere," the biker who had spoken earlier said, his voice sharp. "Not while we're here." With that, the group of bikers moved in unison, their footsteps echoing through the night as they took their positions. Maya watched in awe as they spread out, their movements fluid and coordinated, like a well-oiled machine. They weren't just tough, they were smart. They knew how to handle this. She could see them communicating with one another, their gestures subtle but effective. They were preparing for the confrontation with her stepfather, but Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of peace for the first time in what felt like forever. The bikers were here, and they were ready to face whatever came next. The heavy boots of her stepfather were now only a few feet away. Maya could feel her heart pounding in her chest, the fear creeping back into her mind. But before she could react, one of the bikers stepped forward, his voice loud and commanding. "You've been warned," he called out, his voice echoing through the empty foundry. "Stay away from her." The tension in the air was thick, the anticipation hanging like a storm waiting to break. Maya held her breath as the bikers prepared for what was coming next. She could hear her stepfather's voice, full of rage, but this time, there was something different in it. The bikers weren't backing down. They weren't afraid. And neither was she. The silence was deafening as the heavy boots of Maya's stepfather grew closer. The wind, which had been howling all night, seemed to quiet in the moments before the confrontation. Maya could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, but the presence of the bikers gave her a strange sense of comfort. They were here, and they were not backing down. Her stepfather's angry voice cut through the tension like a knife. "You think you can stand in my way?" he growled. "You're nothing but a bunch of thugs." The biker who had spoken earlier, the one with the deep voice, stepped forward with a calm, unwavering stance. "We're here to make sure you don't hurt her anymore," he said firmly, his words carrying a weight that was impossible to ignore. Maya's stepfather paused, then let out a sharp laugh. "And what? You think you can take me on? You think you can handle me?" His voice was full of arrogance, but there was an edge of uncertainty underneath, as if he wasn't sure whether he was about to face a fight or not. The bikers didn't respond immediately, but their actions spoke louder than words. They formed a tight circle around Maya, each one positioning themselves in a way that made it clear they weren't just protecting her. They were preparing for war. The tension in the air was thick, the kind of silence that came just before the storm. Maya felt herself holding her breath, watching the scene unfold in front of her. She had always been afraid of her stepfather, but now, with the bikers by her side, she felt a spark of hope. You don't know who you're messing with, Maya's stepfather spat, stepping forward. His hands were balled into fists, ready for a fight. But as he advanced, one of the bikers, a tall man with a scruffy beard, stepped into his path. You're done here, the biker said in a low, controlled voice. The two men stood face to face, a few inches apart, each sizing the other up. The biker's eyes were cold, his expression unreadable. Maya's stepfather tried to push past him, but the biker didn't budge. She's not going back with you, he said, his voice steady and calm. Not while we're here. The man's words carried the authority of someone who had seen the worst of the world and wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right. Maya's stepfather growled in frustration, his eyes narrowing. You have no idea who I am, do you? He sneered. I don't care who you are, the biker replied, his voice growing colder. You've already shown us what kind of man you are. And that ends tonight. For a brief moment, Maya saw a flicker of doubt in her stepfather's eyes. He glanced around at the bikers, who were standing firm, unwavering in their resolve. It was as if he realized, for the first time, that he was not the one in control anymore. That power had shifted, and he was no longer the one calling the shots. Maya's stepfather stepped back, his fist still clenched, but his posture had changed. He wasn't as sure of himself as he had been moments ago. The bikers were a force to be reckoned with, and he could feel that. You think you can just walk away from this? He barked, but his voice lacked the conviction it had held before. You don't get to tell me what to do. He started to turn, clearly preparing to leave, but the biker who had spoken first stepped forward again, blocking his path. She's not going anywhere with you, the biker said, his voice unwavering. You'll have to go through us. There was no anger in the biker's tone, just a quiet certainty that told Maya's stepfather this was a fight he would not win. Maya's stepfather's eyes flickered with a mix of rage and fear, and for a moment, he seemed to hesitate. Then, without another word, he turned and stalked off into the darkness, his footsteps echoing in the quiet night. As the sound of his retreating steps faded away, Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. She was safe, for now. The bikers stood around her, their faces softening as they saw her begin to relax. One of them, the man with the deep voice, crouched down to her level. You're safe now, he said gently, his voice full of warmth and kindness. Maya nodded, feeling the weight of everything that had happened crash down on her. She was exhausted, physically and emotionally drained. But she was safe, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel completely alone. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Thank you for saving me. The man smiled, his expression softening as he stood up. It's what we do, he said simply. We protect our own, and you're one of us now. The bikers stood in a loose circle around Maya, their eyes filled with a quiet pride. They had kept their promise. They had protected her, and they weren't going anywhere. The night was still, the tension of the confrontation fading away into the cool evening air. Maya felt something shift inside her. It was like the first glimmer of hope she had felt in a long time. She was no longer a scared little girl running from danger. She was surrounded by people who cared, people who would fight for her. And that made all the difference. The night air was still, the wind had died down, and the only sounds were the faint hum of distant traffic and the occasional rustle of the trees in the dark. Maya stood there, surrounded by the bikers who had come to her rescue, her body still trembling from the fear and tension of the past hours. But now, for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt something else, relief. The heaviness that had weighed on her chest seemed to lift as she looked around at the group of bikers, each one standing tall and strong. They had kept their word. They had protected her. One of the bikers, the one with the deep voice who had been the first to speak, approached her slowly. He gave her a reassuring smile, but there was a certain sadness in his eyes. He had seen this kind of fear before. He had seen the scars it left on people, the kind of pain that wasn't easily erased. You're safe now, he said gently, his voice full of warmth and kindness. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Maya nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. She had run from her stepfather's anger, from his violence, and now, in the presence of these strangers, these bikers, she felt something she hadn't felt in so long. She felt protected, but the feeling didn't last long. Her mind began to race as the reality of the situation hit her. What would happen now? Where would she go? Her stepfather wasn't the type to just let go of his control over her. He wouldn't stop. Maya's thoughts swirled in a storm of uncertainty. The deep-voiced biker must have seen the worry in her eyes, because he crouched down in front of her again, his posture open and welcoming. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly, his eyes locking with hers. "You don't have to worry about him. We've got a plan, and we're not letting him get anywhere near you again." Maya's heart fluttered, with a mix of hope and doubt. She had heard promises before, too many times. But something about this man's words felt different. The way he spoke, with such conviction and care, made her believe him. And for the first time in a long time, Maya allowed herself to believe in the possibility of safety. The bikers gathered around her, and the one with the deep voice began to speak again. "We need to move quickly. We can't stay here too long. But first, we're taking you somewhere safe. There's a shelter not far from here. You'll be safe there, and we'll make sure your stepfather can't reach you." Maya swallowed hard, the reality of her situation hitting her all over again. But she nodded, trusting them. She had no choice. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The deep-voiced biker smiled, his expression softening. "You don't have to thank us," he said. "We're family now, and family always looks out for each other." Maya felt a lump form in her throat. She had never experienced anything like this before. People who cared, who were willing to fight for her, to protect her without asking for anything in return. It was overwhelming. She felt her body relax for the first time in hours, the constant tension that had been with her since she ran from her stepfather slowly starting to fade. The bikers prepared to leave, mounting their motorcycles with practiced ease. Maya hesitated, glancing back at the foundry one last time. The place where she had hidden, the place where she had feared for her life. It felt surreal to be walking away from it, to be leaving that fear behind. But as she looked at the group of bikers, the ones who had become her protectors, she realized that she wasn't alone anymore. She had a future now, a future that wasn't defined by fear and abuse. As they rode off into the night, Maya felt a surge of gratitude and something else, hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't walking it alone. The bikers were with her, and they would do everything in their power to keep her safe. The engines roared to life, cutting through the night air as they sped down the road, the headlights of the motorcycles cutting through the darkness. Maya held on, tight to the biker in front of her, the wind whipping past her face, and she couldn't help but feel a sense of freedom. It was a small taste of the life she had always dreamed of, a life where she could be safe, where she didn't have to live in constant fear. As the road stretched out before them, Maya realized that this was just the beginning. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to face it. With the bikers by her side, she knew she could overcome whatever challenges lay ahead. The ride was long and silent, the hum of the motorcycles and the rush of the wind the only sounds filling the night air. Maya clung to the biker in front of her, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, as they sped down the dark road. The headlights from the bikes illuminated the path ahead, casting long shadows along the asphalt. The vast, empty stretch of highway seemed to stretch on forever, but Maya's mind was elsewhere, racing with thoughts and emotions. She kept her gaze fixed ahead, but every so often, she would glance to her left, where the other bikers were riding in a formation that made her feel like she was part of something larger, something real. She was no longer the scared little girl running from a nightmare. She was part of this group, this family, and for the first time, it felt like she belonged. The deep-voiced biker, who had been her protector since the moment he'd stepped in front of her stepfather, was riding just ahead of her. He'd been a constant presence since they left the foundry, his calm demeanor and steady hand on the throttle giving her the assurance that she was safe, that they were going to make sure nothing happened to her. Maya's heart still raced with fear, but it was no longer the kind of fear that came from hiding in the shadows, waiting to be found. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of what lay ahead. She didn't know where they were going or what would happen next, but she trusted them. She had to. They had kept their word so far, and she couldn't imagine being anywhere else. As they approached the outskirts of a small town, the first rays of morning light began to break through the dark sky. The quiet dawn seemed surreal after the chaos of the past few hours. Maya could feel her body starting to relax, but her mind was still in turmoil. What would happen when they got to the shelter? Would her stepfather come looking for her? Would he bring the authorities with him? These questions swirled in her head, and the uncertainty made it hard to focus on the present. They rode through the small town, the streets eerily quiet at this early hour. The bikers moved like a well-oiled machine, their movements coordinated and precise, each one knowing their role without a word being spoken. The deep-voiced biker led the way, his gaze scanning the surroundings as they made their way toward their destination. Maya's anxiety crept back up, but she refused to let it control her. She had to trust that the bikers would keep her safe. As they pulled up to the shelter, Maya's heart skipped a beat. The building was small, but it looked welcoming, with soft lights glowing from the windows and the sound of voices inside. It was nothing like the dark, cold places she had run from. This was a place of safety, of hope, a place where she could begin to heal. The bikers parked their bikes in front of the shelter, and the deep-voiced biker helped Maya off the motorcycle. "You're safe here," he said quietly, his voice reassuring. "You can rest now. We'll make sure your stepfather can't get to you." Maya nodded, too exhausted to say anything, but the words were more than enough. As they walked toward the entrance of the shelter, the door opened, and a woman stepped out. She looked at Maya with a warm, welcoming smile, but there was something in her eyes, an understanding, a recognition of the pain that Maya had been through. The woman extended her hand to Maya. "We've been expecting you," she said softly. "Come on in. You're safe here." Maya took the woman's hand, the warmth of her touch soothing some of the tension in her body. She stepped inside the shelter, the sound of the door closing behind her signaling the end of her journey for the night. But as the door clicked shut, Maya couldn't help but feel a small sense of dread in the pit of her stomach. The bikers had kept their word. They had protected her from her stepfather. But what about tomorrow? What would happen when her stepfather came looking for her? The deep-voiced biker must have sensed her unease, because he turned to her with a reassuring look. "Don't worry," he said, his voice low and steady. "We're not going anywhere. We'll make sure you're safe." Maya nodded, the words sinking in. She knew she wasn't alone anymore. These bikers, this family, had become her lifeline. They weren't going to let anything happen to her. As the woman inside the shelter led her to a room where she could sleep, Maya's mind began to quiet, the weight of the night's events finally starting to settle. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. It was small, but it was enough. With the bikers by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. They were her family now, and nothing would ever take that away. The door to the shelter closed behind Maya with a soft click, but the sense of safety it promised didn't immediately settle in. The room the woman led her to was small, but it was clean, with a single bed tucked into the corner and a soft light coming from a lamp beside it. A thick, warm blanket lay on the bed, inviting her to rest. Maya stepped inside slowly, looking around, her mind still reeling from the events of the past night. She had been running for so long, never able to stop, never able to relax. Now, for the first time in what felt like forever, she had a place to stay. She sat on the edge of the bed, her legs dangling, unsure of what to do next. The woman, who introduced herself as Sarah, smiled gently at her. "You can sleep here for as long as you need," Sarah said kindly, her eyes soft with understanding. "You're safe now. We'll take care of you." Maya nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She could still hear the sound of her stepfather's voice, the way he had chased her, the way he had always controlled her life. It wasn't just the physical pain he had caused, it was the mental and emotional toll that had worn her down. The past few days had been a blur of fear, anger, and confusion. Now, though, it felt like there was a slight shift in the air, a small, almost imperceptible change that made her feel like she could breathe again. Sarah turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I'll bring you something to eat soon," she said, giving Maya a soft smile. Maya didn't reply immediately, lost in her thoughts. But Sarah was right. She needed rest. Her body was exhausted, and her mind was worn thin from the constant fear. She lay down on the bed, pulling the blanket up around her shoulders, and closed her eyes. It was strange, but for the first time in a long time, she felt safe enough to sleep. The morning light filtered through the window, casting a soft glow across the room. Maya woke up to the sound of footsteps outside her door. It wasn't the heavy, angry footsteps of her stepfather, but the steady, quiet ones of someone who wanted to help her. She sat up, feeling the weight of sleep still on her eyes, and heard a knock at the door. Maya. It was Sarah's voice. Maya pushed herself off the bed and walked over to the door. Yeah, she called out. Sarah opened the door and smiled, holding a tray with a sandwich, some fruit, and a glass of water. I thought you might be hungry, she said, walking in and setting the tray on the small table beside the bed. Maya's stomach growled at the sight of the food, but she hesitated. Thank you, she said quietly, sitting back down on the bed. Sarah didn't leave. Instead, she sat down beside her, watching Maya for a moment before speaking again. I know this is all a lot to take in, she said softly, but I want you to know that you're not alone anymore. You have people who care about you. Maya looked down at the food in front of her, but her thoughts drifted. She wanted to believe Sarah. She wanted to believe that this was the start of something new. But the past still weighed heavily on her. Her stepfather wasn't going to give up that easily. Maya had seen his rage, felt the brunt of it too many times to think he would let her go without a fight. Sarah must have seen the worry in her eyes because she reached out and placed a gentle hand on Maya's shoulder. It's okay to be scared, she said. But you're not alone. We're here to protect you. We'll help you through this. Maya felt a tear slip down her cheek before she could stop it. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words until now. She nodded slowly, her throat tight with emotion. I'm not sure I can ever feel safe again, she whispered. Sarah gave her a soft, understanding smile. It takes time, she said gently. But you will. We'll make sure of that. Maya took a deep breath, feeling something in her chest start to loosen. It wasn't immediate, and it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt like there was a chance for a future without fear. She picked up the sandwich from the tray and took a bite. The food was simple, but it tasted like comfort, like something she hadn't had in so long. As she ate, Sarah sat quietly beside her, giving her the space she needed without pressing her. Maya finished the sandwich, feeling a little stronger, a little more grounded. Thank you, she said softly, looking at Sarah. You don't know how much this means. Sarah smiled warmly. It's our job to make sure you feel safe here. You don't ever have to be afraid again. Maya nodded, her heart filled with gratitude. For the first time, she could feel a flicker of hope growing inside her. It wasn't much, but it was something. The future was still uncertain, and her stepfather could still come looking for her. But for now, Maya was safe. And that was enough. The morning after Maya arrived at the shelter, the world outside seemed quieter, as if the night's storm had passed and left a sense of calm in its wake. Maya sat by the small window, looking out at the street below. The sun was rising, casting a soft golden light across the town. But her mind was still in turmoil. The safety she had felt last night was starting to feel distant. Her stepfather hadn't stopped looking for her. She knew that much. What would happen when he finally caught up? What if he was waiting for her to make one wrong move? She had spent years living in constant fear, but now she was being asked to trust again. Trust strangers. Trust bikers. Trust herself. A knock on the door snapped Maya out of her thoughts. She turned to find Sarah standing in the doorway, a gentle smile on her face. Good morning, Sarah said softly, her eyes warm. How are you feeling today? Maya hesitated for a moment, then forced a smile. I'm okay, she said quietly, though the uncertainty in her voice was clear. Sarah stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. She took a seat next to Maya on the bed, watching her with a thoughtful expression. It's okay if you're not okay, Sarah said, her voice gentle. You've been through a lot. We're here to help you. But if you need to talk, you don't have to do it alone. Maya nodded slowly, not sure what to say. She had so many feelings, so much fear and anger, but she wasn't sure if she could let anyone in. Not yet. Maya started, her voice shaking. I don't know what to do. What if he comes for me? What if he finds me? Sarah reached out and placed a hand on Maya's, offering a soft but reassuring squeeze. We've got people who are keeping an eye on things, Sarah said. You're not alone. You have a whole team behind you. And if he does show up, we'll be ready. Maya looked up at Sarah, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and confusion. What if it's not enough? She whispered. What if he's too strong? Sarah gave her a small, understanding smile. You don't have to worry about that right now, she said. You're safe here. We're going to make sure he can't hurt you again. But you need to trust that we can protect you. Trust that you have people in your corner. Maya swallowed hard, looking down at her hands. She wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that it was possible to feel safe again. But trust wasn't easy. Not for her. I don't know how to trust anymore, Maya admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been hurt so many times. Sarah nodded, her expression softening. I know, she said gently. And I'm not asking you to trust right away. It's going to take time. But we're here for you. And when you're ready, we'll be here to help you rebuild. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of the past pressing down on her. She had spent so many years running, hiding, trying to survive. And now, for the first time, someone was offering her a chance to heal. It was overwhelming, but it was also the first glimmer of hope she had felt in so long. Thank you, she whispered, her voice shaky but filled with gratitude. You don't have to thank me, Sarah said, her voice steady and reassuring. We're just doing what we should be doing. We're here for you. Sarah stood up, giving Maya a small smile. I'll let you get some rest. But if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to come find me, okay? Maya nodded, watching Sarah leave the room and close the door behind her. She sat there for a moment, staring at the door, her heart still heavy with fear, but also filled with something else, a fragile thread of hope. She wasn't sure what the future held, or how long it would take to feel truly safe. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she might be able to breathe. And that was enough for now. As the day passed, Maya stayed in her room, trying to process everything that had happened. She still couldn't shake the feeling that her stepfather was out there, looking for her. But she also knew that for the first time, she had people who would fight for her. She wasn't alone anymore. And that thought, that simple fact, made all the difference. The bikers, Sarah, and the other people at the shelter, they were all part of a world that Maya had never known, a world where people cared enough to protect her. It wasn't perfect. The fears still lingered, and the danger wasn't completely gone. But as the day went on, Maya began to feel something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She wasn't running anymore. She was standing still, waiting to see what would come next. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe that the future could be different. The days that followed Maya's arrival at the shelter were filled with a mixture of quiet routine and the heavy weight of fear that still lingered in the back of her mind. Despite the warmth and safety that surrounded her, the fear of her stepfather's return never quite left. Every time she heard a car engine in the distance or a knock at the door, her heart would race, and her body would tense up, expecting the worst. But as time passed, the feeling of dread started to fade, bit by bit. The shelter provided a sense of security that Maya had never known. It wasn't perfect, and she still found herself struggling with the memories of the violence she had escaped. But it was a place where she could begin to heal. One morning, a few days after she had arrived, Maya found herself sitting in the small community room of the shelter, a cup of warm tea in her hands. The sun was shining through the windows, casting a golden glow over the room. The other residents were busy with their own routines, but for once, Maya felt like she could relax, just a little. Sarah had been right. She was safe here. The door to the community room opened, and Sarah walked in, a smile on her face. How's the tea? She asked, taking a seat across from Maya. Good, Maya replied softly, looking up from her cup. It's nice to have something warm. Sarah nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. I know it's not easy, Maya, but you're doing great. One step at a time. Maya offered her a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. It's just hard to let go of the fear, she admitted. I'm still waiting for him to show up, for him to come and take me back. I can't stop thinking about it. Sarah's expression softened, and she leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. I know it's terrifying, and I can't pretend that your past will disappear overnight. But you need to remember that you're not that scared little girl anymore. You're stronger than you think, and you have people here who will protect you. We'll make sure your stepfather doesn't hurt you again. Maya swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. She wanted to believe Sarah, wanted to believe that this was really the end of the fear, but it was hard to let go of the years of trauma that had shaped her life. She had spent so long hiding, running, and looking over her shoulder that she didn't know how to live without that constant fear. Sarah seemed to sense her hesitation. You don't have to have all the answers right now, she said. You just have to take it one day at a time. And when you're ready, we'll help you take the next step. Maya nodded slowly, the words sinking in. She didn't know when she would be ready, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could start to heal. Later that day, Sarah and a few of the other shelter residents went out to gather food and supplies. Maya, feeling restless and wanting to do something to help, decided to stay behind and help with the chores around the shelter. As she worked, she found herself lost in the rhythm of sweeping the floors and washing dishes, her mind momentarily distracted from the heavy thoughts that had been weighing on her. For a brief moment, it felt like she was just a regular teenager, doing normal things. But the peace was short-lived. As the day wore on, Maya noticed something strange. The air outside had shifted, and there was an uneasy quiet hanging over the shelter. The bikers, who had been keeping watch over the area, were acting more alert than usual. Maya's stomach twisted with unease. Something didn't feel right. Just as she was about to ask Sarah if anything was wrong, the door to the shelter suddenly burst open. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hall. Maya's heart leapt into her throat as she recognized the heavy boots. Her stepfather had found her. The door slammed shut behind him, and there he stood, silhouetted in the doorway, his face twisted with anger. Maya froze, her body going cold with fear. "Maya!" her stepfather shouted, his voice a harsh growl. "Come here. Now." The bikers who had been stationed around the shelter quickly moved to block his path, their faces hard and unyielding. Maya's stepfather sneered, looking at them with contempt. "You think you can stop me?" he spat, his voice venomous. "She's my property. She belongs to me." The deep-voiced biker from earlier stepped forward, his calm demeanor in stark contrast to Maya's stepfather's rage. "She's not going anywhere with you," he said, his voice steady. "Not now, not ever." Maya's stepfather's eyes narrowed, and he took a step forward, but the bikers closed ranks, standing firm. "This is over." The biker continued. "You're not going to hurt her again. We're not backing down." Maya's stepfather paused, his chest heaving with anger, but the threat in the biker's eyes was enough to make him hesitate. For a moment, it seemed like the world had come to a standstill. And then, with a growl of frustration, her stepfather turned and stormed out of the shelter, disappearing into the night. The bikers didn't move, their eyes still trained on the door, watching to make sure he didn't come back. Maya stood frozen, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She had been so certain that she was going to be taken back, that everything she had worked for would be ripped away from her. But it wasn't. She was still here. Safe. The deep-voiced biker turned to her, his face softening. "You're okay," he said, his voice gentle but reassuring. "We won't let him get to you. Not now, not ever." Maya's heart pounded in her chest, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. She was safe, and she wasn't going anywhere. The night after her stepfather's confrontation felt like an eerie calm that had settled over the shelter. Maya had expected fear to creep back in, to feel the same heavy sense of dread that had ruled her life for so long, but it didn't. For the first time in what seemed like forever, she felt a sense of peace, however fragile it was. The bikers, Sarah, and the others at the shelter had made it clear that she was safe. Her stepfather had stormed out, his anger still bubbling under the surface, but he hadn't gotten what he wanted. He had no control over her anymore. Maya lay awake in her room, staring up at the ceiling, her mind racing with thoughts. The quiet was almost deafening, and she kept hearing her stepfather's voice echoing in her mind. But the voices of the bikers, the calm, steady voices of the men who had kept their promise to her, pushed those dark thoughts aside. She thought about them often, especially the deep-voiced biker who had been there from the start. He had been her protector, standing firm when it seemed like there was no way out. And now, for the first time, she could breathe without the weight of fear crushing her chest. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding anymore. The next morning, the day after the confrontation, Sarah found Maya sitting by the window again, her face thoughtful. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a soft glow over the room. Sarah walked over and sat down beside her. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently, her voice soft and reassuring. Maya turned to Sarah, a small smile playing on her lips. "I think I'm starting to believe it's really over," she said quietly. "For the first time in a long time, I'm not scared." Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with warmth and understanding. "It's a big step, Maya. It's okay to take things slow. You don't have to rush it. But I'm glad you're feeling a little better." Maya looked out the window, her thoughts drifting. She felt a sense of gratitude for Sarah, for the shelter, and for the bikers who had promised to protect her. It was hard to believe, but they had kept that promise. I've never had people who really cared before, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not like this. Not like, you guys. Sarah gave her a soft smile. That's what family does, Maya. They take care of each other. You're part of this family now, and we're here for you. Maya nodded, feeling the truth of her words settle into her heart. It was a slow process, but she was beginning to understand. She was part of something now. For so long, she had felt like she was drifting, alone and abandoned. But now, she had a place. She had people who cared about her. Later that day, Sarah took Maya aside. I know things have been overwhelming, she said, her expression serious but kind. But I want you to know that there are options for you now. You don't have to go back to that life. There are resources we can connect you with. You can finish school, get the help you need, and start over. Maya listened quietly, absorbing her words. The thought of starting over, of having a future that was her own, felt foreign and overwhelming. But it also felt like something she could finally reach for. She had always dreamed of a life where she could be herself, free from the fear and abuse. Maybe it was possible. Maybe she could finally have that. That evening, after dinner, Maya sat outside, on the small porch of the shelter, watching the sun set behind the mountains in the distance. The bikers had gathered around, talking quietly among themselves, their motorcycles parked in a neat line. They were watching out for her, keeping their promise, and she knew they would never let her down. Maya thought about the future, and for the first time, she allowed herself to think about what it might look like. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't face it alone. She had a family now, and that thought brought her a sense of peace that she hadn't known she could feel. The deep-voiced biker who had been her protector sat next to her on the porch, his presence steady and reassuring. He didn't say anything at first, just sat quietly, letting the silence stretch between them. Finally, he turned to her and said, I know you've been through a lot, and I know it's not easy to trust again, but I want you to know, we've got your back. You don't have to be afraid anymore. Maya met his gaze, her heart full of gratitude. I don't know how to thank you, she said softly. You've done more for me than anyone ever has. He gave her a small smile, his eyes softening. You don't have to thank us, he replied. You're family now. That's what family does. The sun had set completely, and the sky was painted with shades of pink and purple. Maya sat there for a while, listening to the soft sounds of the night, the voices of the bikers in the background. It was peaceful, and she realized that for the first time, she wasn't looking over her shoulder, wondering when the next attack would come. She wasn't running anymore. She was home. And for the first time in a long time, Maya allowed herself to believe that she deserved to be happy, that she deserved a future free from fear. Days turned into weeks, and Maya began to adjust to life at the shelter. The heavy weight of fear that had once dominated her life slowly started to lift, but the shadows of her past still lingered in the corners of her mind. She knew it would take time to fully heal, but each day brought small victories. She spent more time with Sarah, learning to trust her and the other residents, finding solace in their kindness and understanding. The bikers, too, had become a constant presence in her life. They weren't just the tough, intimidating figures who had come to her rescue. They had become her protectors, her family. The deep-voiced biker, who had been the first to stand up to her stepfather, kept a watchful eye on her, always there when she needed reassurance. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Maya was sitting on the porch again, her thoughts drifting. It had become a ritual of sorts, these quiet moments of reflection. She had learned to appreciate the calm, the way the world seemed to pause just before nightfall. She looked out at the horizon, a slight breeze tugging at her hair, when the sound of an approaching motorcycle interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see the deep-voiced biker pull up in front of the shelter, his familiar figure stepping off the bike with ease. He looked over at her and gave her a small wave. Hey, Maya, he called out as he walked toward her. You doing all right? Maya smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing as he approached. Yeah, I'm good, she replied, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. He sat down next to her, his presence as steady as ever. You sure? He asked, his voice softer now, knowing how much she had been through. Maya nodded, her gaze lingering on the sunset. I guess it's just hard to shake the feeling that something bad is going to happen, she confessed. Like, no matter how safe I feel now, I'm still waiting for the other shoe to drop. He was quiet for a moment, and then he spoke, his voice firm yet gentle. That's normal. It's going to take time for that fear to fade. But I want you to know something. Maya turned to look at him, curious. What? You're not running anymore. You're not hiding. You've got people who will stand beside you and fight for you. And I'll be damned if anyone tries to take that from you. Maya's heart fluttered at his words. She knew he meant every word. It wasn't just a promise, it was a guarantee. The bikers had been there for her from the very beginning, and they weren't going anywhere. Slowly, Maya let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it felt more manageable now, like a distant echo rather than an overwhelming roar. Thanks, she whispered, grateful for his unwavering support. The deep-voiced biker nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. Anytime, Maya. You've got a family now, and we've got your back. The next few days passed by in a blur of routine. Maya continued to adjust to her new life, learning to navigate the challenges of healing from the trauma of her past. She spent more time with the other residents of the shelter, slowly forming friendships and connections that made her feel less alone. Sarah continued to be a guiding presence, offering advice and encouragement whenever Maya needed it. One afternoon, Sarah pulled Maya aside, her expression more serious than usual. Maya, she began, I want to talk to you about something important. We've been keeping an eye on your stepfather, and we think it's time we take some further steps to ensure he can't hurt you again. Maya's stomach tightened at the mention of her stepfather, but she nodded, her fear now tempered with a sense of readiness. What do we need to do? She asked, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. Sarah took a deep breath, her gaze meeting Maya's with a mix of determination and care. We need to get a restraining order. It's time to make sure he can't come near you again. Maya felt a surge of relief mixed with anxiety. The idea of taking such a concrete step was both terrifying and empowering. It meant facing her past head-on, but it also meant taking control of her future. I'll do it, Maya said quietly, her voice firm with resolve. I'm not going to let him hurt me anymore. Sarah smiled, her pride in Maya evident. I'm proud of you, Maya. We'll do this together. The process wasn't easy. It required a lot of paperwork, a lot of waiting, and a lot of courage on Maya's part. But she did it. The restraining order was granted, and for the first time in a long time, Maya felt like she was truly free. The relief that flooded her was overwhelming, and as she sat in the small room of the shelter, holding the document in her hands, she allowed herself to feel something she hadn't in years: hope. That night, as Maya sat with the bikers, watching the stars twinkle above, she realized how far she had come. The road ahead would still have challenges, but she wasn't facing it alone anymore. She had people who cared about her, who would protect her, and who would help her rebuild her life. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya allowed herself to believe that she had a future worth fighting for. Weeks passed since Maya's stepfather had last come looking for her, and with each passing day, the anxiety she had once carried began to feel more distant. Life at the shelter was starting to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like a real home. Sarah had been her steady guide, and the bikers, especially the deep-voiced one, had kept their word. Maya felt safe. Still, there were moments when doubt crept back in, when Maya's mind would wander to the past, to the man who had controlled her life for so long. But those moments were becoming fewer, and they didn't hold the same weight they once had. She had learned to trust again, not just the people around her, but herself. She could face the future now, without constantly looking over her shoulder. It was a quiet afternoon when Sarah asked her to step into the office. There was a kind of heaviness in the air that made Maya's stomach flutter. She wasn't sure what was going on, but she followed Sarah, her curiosity piqued. Sarah greeted her with a warm smile, but there was something in her eyes that made Maya's heart race. I know things have been moving fast, Sarah began, sitting down across from Maya. But we've made some progress, and I think it's time we take the next step. Maya sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. What's the next step? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Sarah leaned forward, her expression serious but supportive. We've been in contact with some people who can help you start over, she said gently. It's a program that offers long-term support, everything from schooling to job placement. It's a way for you to move forward, to begin building a life on your terms. Maya blinked, surprised by the offer. I don't know, she said softly. The idea of starting over. of truly moving forward, felt both thrilling and terrifying. I've never had a real life, Sarah. I don't even know where to begin. Sarah's gaze softened. Starting over isn't easy. I won't lie about that. But you don't have to do it alone. You've come so far already, and this is the next step. You've earned it, Maya. And we'll be with you every step of the way. Maya's heart began to race. It was a chance to build a future, to finally leave behind the fear and the abuse. It was a chance to be free, to live her life the way she always dreamed. But she was also scared. Scared of failing. Scared of the unknown. What if I can't do it? Maya asked quietly, her voice filled with uncertainty. What if I mess up? Sarah smiled reassuringly. You've already done the hardest part, Maya. You've taken control of your life. This next step is just part of the journey, and we're here to help you along the way. Maya sat in silence, thinking about her options. She had spent so many years just surviving, never really living. But now, for the first time, she had a chance to build something real. It wasn't just about escaping her stepfather. It was about reclaiming her future. Slowly, Maya nodded. Okay, she said, her voice small but determined. I'll do it. I'll take the next step. Sarah's face lit up with a smile, and she reached across the table to take Maya's hand. You won't regret it, Maya, she said softly. You're going to do amazing things. As Sarah explained the details of the program, Maya felt a mix of excitement and fear. She knew it wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to face them. Later that day, Maya went for a walk in the small park near the shelter. She felt the cool breeze on her face and watched as the leaves danced in the wind. It was a beautiful, peaceful moment, one that she had never truly allowed herself to appreciate before. As she walked, Maya thought about the future. She thought about the opportunity she had in front of her, the chance to finally start over. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going to run anymore. She wasn't going to hide. The bikers, Sarah, and the shelter had given her a chance at a new life. They had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself, and now, Maya was ready to believe in her own strength. The world was wide open in front of her, and for the first time, she wasn't afraid to take the first step. She was ready, and that was all she needed. The days that followed Maya's decision to take the next step were a blur of meetings, paperwork, and the steady rhythm of her new routine at the shelter. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Each morning, she woke up with a sense of purpose, no longer haunted by the constant fear that had once consumed her. Instead, she focused on what she could do now, on the future she was beginning to build. She started attending the support sessions the shelter had set up for her. It was hard at first, talking about the past, facing the things she had tried so hard to forget. But slowly, Maya started to feel lighter. The weight on her shoulders wasn't as heavy anymore. Sarah checked in with her regularly, offering guidance when needed, and the bikers continued to provide a sense of protection and community. Their presence, once a reminder of the dangers she had faced, now felt like a shield. Maya felt like she belonged. There was one biker, in particular, who had become a quiet anchor for her, the deep-voiced man who had first stepped up when she was most vulnerable. He had a way of making her feel safe, like nothing could touch her as long as he was around. But more than that, he had an understanding in his eyes. He knew what it meant to carry pain, to rebuild from the broken pieces of a past you couldn't escape. One evening, a few weeks after her stepfather had last tried to track her down, Maya found herself sitting on the porch again, the familiar sound of the wind rustling the trees and the faint hum of traffic in the distance. It was a peaceful night, the kind she had never been able to enjoy before. She was getting used to it now. As she sat there, lost in her thoughts, the deep-voiced biker walked over to her, his boots crunching softly on the gravel. He smiled when he saw her, but there was something in his eyes that made Maya pause. Hey, Maya, he said, sitting down beside her. You doing okay? Maya nodded, but the words felt distant. I'm good, she replied, even though the unease in her chest told her otherwise. The biker turned to face her fully, his eyes soft but searching. You're not alone in this, you know, he said quietly, his voice steady. None of us are. You've got a lot of people behind you, more than you might think. Maya glanced at him, her mind whirling. I know, she said slowly. It's just, sometimes I don't know how to move forward. I've been stuck for so long. He didn't say anything right away, just sat beside her, letting the silence stretch between them. Maya felt the weight of his presence, steady and solid. Then he spoke again, his voice softer this time. The past is always going to be a part of you, Maya. But it doesn't have to define who you are or where you go from here. You've made it this far. That's something. Maya looked up at him, meeting his gaze. I guess I've been afraid to trust that I can keep moving forward. I don't know what it looks like. He gave her a knowing smile. That's okay, he said. Nobody expects you to have all the answers right now. But you've already started something big. You've got the courage to face what's ahead, even when it's uncertain. Maya swallowed, feeling a lump form in her throat. I want to believe that, she said, her voice trembling. I really do. But sometimes it feels too big, like I'll never be able to make it on my own. The deep-voiced biker placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch reassuring. You're not alone, he repeated, his voice firm. You've got us. You've got a family now. We're all in this together. And we'll be with you every step of the way. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of his words sinking in. She had been running from everything for so long. But now she was standing still, ready to face what was next. Slowly, she opened her eyes and met his gaze once more. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything. The biker nodded, his expression softening. No need to thank me. It's what we do. You don't have to go through this alone. Ever. Maya felt a small spark of hope ignite in her chest. For the first time in so long, she felt like she had a chance. She wasn't sure where her future would take her, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't running anymore. And for the first time, she could imagine a life where she wasn't just surviving, but living. The next morning, Maya woke up early, her mind filled with a new sense of purpose. She had the opportunity to start fresh, and she wasn't going to waste it. The shelter, Sarah, and the bikers had all given her the tools to rebuild, but it was up to her to take the next step. As she dressed and prepared for the day, a sense of determination washed over her. She wasn't just the scared girl who had been hiding from her past. She was someone stronger now, someone who had the power to change her life. And as she walked out the door and into the new day, Maya felt a renewed sense of hope, knowing that she wasn't alone. She was ready for whatever came next. Months passed since Maya took the first step toward rebuilding her life, and with each passing day, she grew stronger. The fear that had once clung to her like a shadow was gradually replaced with a sense of confidence she had never known. The deep-voiced biker, Sarah, and the others at the shelter had become her unwavering support system, helping her navigate a world she had never truly felt a part of before. Maya had come a long way from the terrified girl who had first arrived at the shelter. She no longer spent her nights looking over her shoulder, afraid that her past would come crashing back into her life. Instead, she spent her days working on herself, focusing on her education, and connecting with people who genuinely cared for her. The process was slow, and there were moments when the weight of her past threatened to pull her down, but she had learned to face those moments with resilience. One evening, as the sun set behind the shelter, Maya found herself standing on the porch, taking in the quiet beauty of the world around her. It was a peaceful moment, a stark contrast to the chaos that had once filled her life. The deep-voiced biker approached, his steady presence always a source of comfort for her. You look like you're in deep thought, he said with a small smile, his voice gentle yet firm. Maya turned to face him, her gaze soft but determined. I'm just thinking about everything, she said, her voice calm. About how far I've come. It still feels surreal sometimes. The biker nodded, his expression thoughtful. It's a big change. But you've done the work, Maya. You've earned this peace. And it's yours to keep. Maya felt a swell of gratitude in her chest. For so long, she had been trapped in a cycle of fear and survival. But now she had a future that was hers to shape. I'm not sure I would have made it this far without you, she admitted quietly. The biker's smile softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. You would have made it, he said. You're stronger than you know. We just helped you find your way. Maya looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and determination. I'm ready to keep going, she said. I'm ready to live the life I've always dreamed of. The biker nodded, his eyes steady and proud. I know you are. And we'll be here to support you, every step of the way. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Maya's life continued to evolve. She found work at a local cafe, where she met new people who encouraged her to keep moving forward. She started taking classes online, determined to finish her education and create the life she had always dreamed of. The shelter remained her base, her safe place, but she was no longer confined to its walls. She was living, truly living, for the first time in her life. One afternoon, Sarah pulled Maya aside, her expression warm but serious. "There's something I want to talk to you about," she said. Maya followed Sarah into the small office, curiosity piqued. Sarah smiled as she sat down across from her. "I've been in touch with a few organizations that help people transition to independent living," she said. "I think you're ready for the next step. You've been doing amazing, and it's time for you to have a place of your own." Maya felt her heart skip a beat. A place of her own. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. For so long, she had never felt safe enough to consider it. But now, with everything she had accomplished, it seemed like the right time. "Are you sure I'm ready?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Sarah's smile widened, her eyes full of confidence. "You've been more than ready. You've already built a solid foundation. Now it's time for you to spread your wings and take flight." Maya took a deep breath, feeling a wave of emotion rush over her. She had come so far from the frightened girl who had once felt like there was no way out. And now, she was standing on the threshold of a new chapter, one where she would be in control of her future. "Okay," she said, her voice firm. "I'm ready." The next few weeks were filled with the excitement of preparing for her new life. Maya found a small apartment in a quiet part of town, and with the help of Sarah and the bikers, she was able to move in. The first night in her new place was quiet, the kind of quiet she had never known. As she unpacked her things, Maya realized how much she had changed. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first arrived at the shelter. She was stronger, more confident, and ready to face whatever came next. As the days turned into months, Maya continued to build the life she had always dreamed of. The fear that had once controlled her was no longer a part of her. She had the power to shape her own future, and she was determined to make it a good one. She kept in touch with Sarah and the bikers, grateful for the family they had become. And every now and then, when she felt uncertain, she would take a moment to look back at how far she had come, and she would remember that she was no longer running. She was living, and that was enough. I have written a compelling story of survival, strength, and hope in this tale that draws inspiration from Hell Angel stories. It follows the journey of a young girl who, after escaping from a dangerous past, begins to rebuild her life with the support of unexpected allies. Through the twists and turns of her difficult journey, the strength of family, loyalty, and determination shines through. The bikers, who are part of the community of Hell Angel stories, offer more than protection. They offer a sense of belonging and a chance at freedom. As the story unfolds, it highlights the challenges of overcoming trauma and finding a future filled with hope. Each chapter is a step forward in the protagonist's transformation, all set against the backdrop of the powerful bond that forms between her and the bikers. If you are a fan of Hell Angel stories, this narrative will resonate deeply with you as it explores themes of resilience, redemption, and the power of human connection. Through determination and the strength of those around her, the protagonist learns that no matter how dark the past may have been, there is always a way to build a brighter future. Hell Angel stories have long been associated with strength, brotherhood, and overcoming adversity, and this one is no different. As the protagonist faces her fears, she comes to realize that the strength of those who stand by her will help her find peace and rebuild her life, ultimately embracing the chance to live a life free of fear and filled with hope.